Well, hello, community, kind folks, and creatives out there. Um, we all know pigeons are the garbage disposal of the natural world. That's why we need pigeons. They don't make great pets, but they're like the flying version of sharks. You know that. No, um, hello, everyone. We're back to world building, and this time period, we're going to delve into the Dark Ages. I know there's plenty of time periods out there, and I'm being very generalized with this because what we're doing, we're using it for role playing games. But just making start out with a little comment from the chat there for my Dead Man the Storyteller. Anyway, sorry, I got distracted there. This is RPG with DBJ, and on a demi-daily deep dive, we go Monday through Friday, just world building, talking about all kinds of things. Happen to be taking on, I don't know, a really strange challenge that I hadn't really thought about, which is like, hell, this might be like a 30-day world building challenge or something, which I hadn't really thought about, but I guess it's a thing. Okay, so we started out with world building with classes from 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, but now squirrel. So now we're into world building through time periods, and not just slightly different than just world building, but like selling the idea. Like if you've never played in that kind of setting or that thematic world, historic world, like why would you want to? So we're actually kind of getting together, thinking of themes to tell people like, hey, why should you do it? Because it's really fun, or maybe people haven't thought outside the box within that time period, and then trying to blend both the historical portions of it and the gaming parts of it, which sometimes they don't really clash too well, just because it would be rather boring and monotonous and really crazy to try to create a game that is entirely realistic, and not very fun, I think. Prue says, also rats. I embrace all Gaia's beautiful creatures in my yard. Yeah, I'm a big city kid. We just get in fist fights with rats. Oh, okay. So the Dark Ages. Oh, by the way, gotta give you this preamble before I start that. Bloodbath. Oh man. Sunday evening, I will be interviewed by Jeremy Lilly of Erasmus Expeditions. I believe I'll be his 5th or maybe 6th interviewee on his show Help Action. So so check out Erasmus Expedition, and I'll be on there. Each 1 hour episode of Help Action, he talks about a specific theme, whether it's like showmanship or whatever, and of course I'll be on there talking about exploration. So as your self-appointed third pillarist, I have to I have to let the masses know. And of course Prue says, blood for the blood god. Anyway, the Dark Ages. Okay, so we often just very generally blend Dark Ages and medieval when it comes to the world's most popular role-playing game. But I specifically want to talk about the Dark Ages, the period after what we talked about with the Bronze Age and the Roman Empire, and the confluence of so many things that are destructive to society that all came together, all came together to bring about this this dark age of society, and a number of things have come together that we can point out that created this dark age, and then we can start to pick and pull things apart, like whether in our own setting, if we wanted to make a dark age in our own setting, like do we want to keep those things or switch them around, or create this confluence of very traumatic events that all took place at the same time. Bruce says, can't wait. Hope to hear all those episodes. I really appreciate Jeremy from Erasmus Expeditions. And I know your episode will be interesting. Thank you. Yeah, Jeremy from Erasmus Expeditions. He posts a ton of live plays. He always runs actual plays in very many different worlds that he creates and different gaming systems. So check that out. I don't believe he has as many viewers as the number of games he puts out there, but he's extremely vibrant and active on the Absolute Tabletop Facebook group. So join the Absolute Tabletop Facebook group. Cheers. Okay. So Dark Ages. One of the things in the Dark Ages, and yes, I know historically it really isn't called the Dark Ages any longer, but yeah, Proust is getting a game of his. He's a very great, he's an excellent dungeon master and game master. So you really got to do it. Very open, has been doing it for a long time, probably 20, 25 plus years. Okay, so one of the reasons why it was initially called the Dark Ages is because of the lack of we mentioned about technological and social and intellectual revolutions during the Bronze Age of the Roman Empire, and how, and not just the Roman Empire, but like Egypt and many places around the world where things were starting to develop. People were thinking open-mindedly about the world, but as usually happens when society flows one way, it overcorrects going the other direction, right? So free thinking led to basically decadence and debauchery, and if everyone always free thinks all the time, then traditions get thrown out the window. There is no morality any longer, at least seen by these people. So religious puritans, religious fanaticism really reared its head during that time. Proust says the Dark Ages is extremely Eurocentric. I wouldn't doubt it, although I'm not a historian. I'm not very smart with many things, but yes, and that probably very easily spread throughout, just because the Roman Empire was so large. Its influence still existed, so then once it spread, it was just easier to spread to other parts of the world. And of course, Dead Man the Storyteller says Dark Ages is just prior to medieval times. Exactly. I believe it, well, doing a little Wikipedia search, it was like between the 5th and 10th centuries, whereas what we would consider the classic medieval was like after 11th through like 14th, 15th centuries, where we think of like, the silvered plate mail and all that kind of business. But during the Dark Ages, Zevron's Oasis, many cultures have had a dark age, but yours was so prolonged and well chronicled. And that's really a thing, right? I mean, most of the time when we focus on a particular region of the world historically, it's usually just because we happen to have the most knowledge about that period of time, not necessarily that it was the most influential or the most important, or you know what I mean. It just happens that we happen to have a lot of information. Whereas if you have cultures that are very verbal, they pass information down through stories and don't do a lot of writing, chronicling their history, it tends to be forgotten. Like here, indigenous peoples in the United States, there's not a lot of chronicled information about all the tribes that lived here, so it's very difficult. So you have people that have to pass it down verbally. But that being said, the Dark Ages had a lot of things. It was the destruction of the cultural desire to destroy the works of what happened beforehand. It's the idea of the pyramids being built and aqueducts being constructed, and people studying the stars and then destroying that information because of its relationship to the decadence that also followed it, right? So it's there's a term about throwing a term known as throwing away the baby with the bathwater. It's like, if for whatever reason in this dark age that you may run in your game, that the evils and decadence of the the previous age beforehand, the people may want to have a desire to throw away everything related to them, right? So if they were murdering people in the streets and then they also created, I don't know, roadways that were allow travel to become better, then they're just like, well, let's destroy all the roads as well because they, they killed, murdered people in the streets, right? And Prue says, uh, Bruce mentions in the chat as destroying and hiding old knowledge, so nefarious. That was a thing too, where the church would hide or destroy old knowledge. That's a very common theme amongst dystopian societies, like the movie Fahrenheit 51, and a number of other things where people are burning books or hiding knowledge or pushing the idea that literacy leads to evil. So you have individuals in power or power structures that want to keep the knowledge out of the people. So the more illiterate they are, the less likely they are to read things and spread disinformation about you, especially if you're the one who is the literate. Zevron says dungeons and magic items could be war artifacts. Prue says, I feel like we're on the cusp again. And very much so, right? Like like we're having here in the States, we're having a measles outbreak because people don't want to get vaccinated. Parents choose not to get their children vaccinated because of the fear of vaccinations causing like Down syndrome and some other things. But it's like, well, yes, but there was a reason that vaccination was a thing, and then people are starting to backtrack and backpedal on that. And many times it happens to be that, like, from your point of view in history, the dark time, you consider things to have a dark time, and you want to correct that. And like I said, people tend to overcorrect one direction, and then they overcorrect into the other direction. The 60s hippie culture was an overcorrection in the United States from the over conservatism, et cetera, et cetera. And it will just keep on going on unless we, there's most people tend to be in the middle, but you're always going to have these large groups that orbit on the outside. So, okay, so we have the elimination, hiding, destruction of knowledge. Zevron 08 says a Dark Age setting could be after an all-out war of magic users destroying most of society. The survivors live in fringe states or castles. And that's exactly right. Like, I mean, you could have war machines and powerful magics and creatures hidden away and portals to dark worlds that were used. And just as people spoke about these things in historically, like it happened in the past, there could be enough generations, one or more, where there may be a few that are alive that knew about it, but most people are like, no, that wasn't really a thing. Dragons never flew around. Again, bring up Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones plays with that idea, right? That there, people remember fairy tale stories of dragons and monsters and people, using dark magics, but the average citizen's like, yeah, but not really. I mean, I know people wrote it down, but I'd have to see it to believe it. And so you could have, like Zevron says, in battlefields or ancient barracks, castle cities, they could be, overgrown with like weeds and leaves, or like, ancient war machines that are waiting to be awoken, or that are rusted out hulks or something like that. You could have those things exist. And so there would have to be people who would want to take advantage of that and go find these ancient artifacts and such, and find these hidden enclaves that might still be holding on to these old magics. Also a part that happened in the Dark Ages was a lot of famine and the spread of disease and plague. And, medieval peoples blamed diseases and plague and the movement of the sun and stars on the behavior of the people, right? The evil that happened before is causing the plagues that happen today. Just as, the free the free living and open sex and everything brought to us drug addiction and sexually transmitted diseases, right? It's conflating all of the things together into one to make people think that by destroying those things, we are now going to be more enlightened. Of course, you could also bring in, like Zevran says, the leaders of these states could be wizards, some of veterans of the war, or maybe sorcerers could be more prominent because literacy and education is far less prevalent. So inherent magic is more sought out. Bruce says that's what I'm thinking. Wizards with spell books could be scapegoats. Yes, I mean, it's essentially in this world, like the PCs themselves, based on how they are designed and built, could be the scapegoats they represent the dark age of the world, and we are trying to bring people into a new light. And just as today and throughout history, people do some pretty nasty things in the hopes of enlightening themselves. Inquisitions and tortures and interrogations could be very prevalent. The Inquisition, proctors going around, religious proctors going around, smashing people upon the head. The old piracy thing of beatings will continue until morale improves, right? There very well could be spellbook burnings as it would be, in asking people to give up their things and burning them in open courtyards and preaching to the masses. And Zevran08 says wizards hide as clerics. The normal populace can't tell the difference between holy magic and arcane. No, they wouldn't be able to tell. And for those who want to take advantage of this age, I absolutely feel that wizards would pretend to be having divine knowledge, right? I mean, there's nothing stopping a wizard by saying, "Oh, I have these great magics because they were given to me by," and then name one or more of the gods that exist in your world, right? Why wouldn't there be charlatans out there doing their thing, especially if religion has like fled the world, or the religious masses are being, the divinities in the world are backing some of the most evil people in the world. There would be people who would flee from religion, and maybe even flee from technology if it destroyed the world, especially if they see the remnants of that, destroyed castles and children playing on the husks of giant beasts that were slain in this dark age, blaming wizards for bringing dragons to the world, blaming wizards for the hordes of undead that they had to deal with, blaming the clerics for not curing the diseases of the world when they were so prominent in holding back the age of disease and famine and plague, right? Because clerics, using 5th edition, clerics are able to create food and water and good berry to feed people and lay on hands or use healing word to heal the population, when they can't do that any longer, or it is their abilities are ineffective against a flood of these things coming along. Cure disease doesn't work, for lower levels on thousands of people, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. So they may consider their gods to be ineffective, right? So that could be a thing that it just, the problems of the world just got out of hand, and people were just like, "What? That's your fault," Let's see. Proof says there's danger in writing down knowledge for everyone to read. Some would feel, unless written down by specific kinds of people, of course, because rules are never for everyone, and that is the case. If you're in power, you're going to do. First of all, any person that's in power ever is going to do everything they can to maintain their position, and you're not going to. There's always a danger in uplifting the people below you, because when you uplift those people below you, they now become your adversaries. They can become challenge your regime. They can challenge your word and your rules, and so, or even question the hypocrisy that you're disseminating. So you don't want the people below you. to rise up. And then the people above you, you want to gain every advantage you can against the people above you, which is to steal their knowledge, to steal their power, um to ruin their reputation. Those people aren't God kings, I'm the true God king, that kind of thing. um just the weakening people. I mean, for forever, that's exactly why half the population, female population, was kept down, because why would you want to uplift another 50% of the population? That just becomes that many more people you have to contend with, taking you out of power. So you always want to, I mean, I'm not saying it's correct, I'm saying during these periods of times, that going through their minds, you always want to push them down, because life was just brutal. And in their minds, they aren't evil, they're just like, listen, I'm in a comfortable position in life, and I am not losing it at all. And Prue goes on to say, and for some strange reason, everyday people and marginalized people are never invited into the club, where they get to read or write to protect their feeble minds. Of course, right? You don't want the downtrodden to rise up. They are the unwashed masses. You're not going to give them a washcloth, right? You need to stay where you're at. And with life being so cheap, especially if people were dying, and piles of dead bodies are around because of whatever kind of disease is spreading throughout the land, you don't want to be part of that. And usually, if a certain part of the population is getting sick anyway because they're already poor, maybe they deserved it, right? Zevron 08 says, though that does make you wonder, how is healing done? Through herbalism, medicine and magic wouldn't be as prevalent, maybe in back alleys as a doctor for a lower class. Andrews from Dragon Age 2. Yeah, very much. I absolutely agree with that, where you could, well, first of all, mechanically, you can just reskin it and just call it like herbalism or alchemy or something. Apothecaries trying to heal people. But also the idea of the divine, you got the cleric who's able to heal people. It's possible that either healing is completely ineffective and just doesn't exist in this world, which very much could be a possibility, or it is so ineffective in slowing the spread of whatever it is, that although people may see you touched by the divine, it's almost like a parlor trick. The healing might just be a parlor trick more than helping society, right? Handing out one cheese sandwich while 8,000 people starve is more of a shameful joke than it is someone trying to help, right? It's about the numbers, and I think that if you still want to keep clerics as they are, I think it's just a matter of numbers, the numbers game versus anything else that would be happening in the world, especially if people were just. When society changes, it's easy to get people to blame a group of people, to burn churches and to string up clerics on, and burning them in town squares and such, and watching their screams as maybe their divine powers try to heal them as they burn over and over again, and people just laughing at them like, look at them, they're trying to, their pagan gods are trying to save their lives, but look, it's still not useful. Look what they've done. They've let us die. You're mortal. I'm blaming you because you're mortal, and instead of saying, your touch of divinity has been helping us, it is the touch of divinity that you have isn't good enough, and so therefore, why do we even need it anymore? Prue says, good healing is only for the rich and well-connected. I like that. I like that a lot. If someone deigns to use healing powers for actual good, they better be careful how they go about it, or they might, or they're in trouble. Especially people in power, they are not going to want you helping out the masses. If you are one of these people who's true to, even in today's society, if you're one of these religious people that's going around feeding the homeless, there's city leaders out there that are just like, whoa, easy now. don't feed all the homeless now. But I mean, you got to be careful. I mean, what happens if they're all healthy and then they want to stay that way, right? You blame, it's spreading that blame to other things. Oh, well, you're feeding the homeless. Now they're healthy. Now they want to stay homeless. Now you're helping to propagate the homeless population, right? It's easy to go from one step to the other to start to make a confluence of problems and attaching them together. And I think player wise, it would be really hard to embrace this world. You really have to have buy-in, because we today, as our larger role-playing community, are very intelligent, we're very open-minded, and we're able to see, intellectually rationalize things through and spread them into their divergent camps. But imagine being a open-minded person in this dark age. It's just gonna, I mean, just talking, having a rational conversation with people is going to be hella difficult, right? Dead Man, the storyteller, says, like the Dragonlance setting prior to the War of the Lance, the Chronicles trilogy of books. Yeah, the Dragonlance books were about that too, where it kind of referred to referred to a darker time. And it would be very interesting to have, especially if you have long-lived races. There could be long-lived races that are now marginalized, like the elves and dwarves, maybe, who remember this age of, and to them, an age of enlightenment, but humanity may have, expanded so much that they consider them to be from this darker era, and they don't want to have anything to do with the elves or dwarves or whatever, thinking of them as evil or demons, or being tainted by it. I mean, we know plenty of religions and power structures in the world will paint you with an enemy brush just by associating yourselves with someone else. You could pick any age in our world. Here in the U.S., we had the age of McCarthyism, where or even today, in our country, whenever you do something that someone else doesn't like politically, you're not considered a patriot, right? You're not a patriot if you eat cherry pie instead of apple. You're not a patriot if you don't watch baseball or something, right? You're not a patriot if you don't flush twice. I mean, you could come up, it's like you could rationalize anything by saying, like, you're X if you don't do Y, or you're X if you do Y, or you're X if you associate with Y. You know what I mean? And it would be very cool for PCs to be the hunted, almost the ostracized in this world. Even in the Witcher, many of them were like the dark heroes of the world. What the hell just happened? Bruce says, I love to play in something like that, playing a cleric or paladin that starts out completely buying into the paradigm and then getting their cognitive veil lifted. Yeah, just being a religious leader, or feeling like you're going on these religious purges to wipe the world of darkness, and then realizing that, what, these people really aren't as evil as you thought they would be. Yeah, Zevron OA says, I love to play an undercover wizard trying to disguise spells as parlor tricks. And maybe there's always somebody in the background, someone always hiding in the shadows, reporting on you. And that is a great trick that people in power use. They try to recruit others and get, it's like keeping rabid dogs. You feed half the dogs so that the other starving dogs never rebel against you, but they go against the dogs that are being fed. And it's just like society, right? It's getting those people who are just being little tricks of being given power, and then they are the ones that report to the ones in power that you are whatever. rebelling against the power structure simply by not supporting the power structure. If you're not for us, you're against us. And so, like was mentioned before, sorcerers may have a huge power in this world, but wizards may not, because they are the ones that are trying to uncover lost knowledge and such. There may be people who need herbal medicines and alchemy to help themselves out in this life, and just the PC's mission could be just giving helpful aid to some of these downtrodden, while the the men are going out to go through people's homes and uncovering their healing salves and things like that, because they are from a dark age, from their point of view, a dark age where those books of knowledge are evil and they're going to corrupt your mind, and we need to bring them out and burn them and stuff like that. It's what's the movie, Equilibrium, or Fahrenheit 51, or any in 1984, where burning books is a thing, and or burning knowledge or getting technology and such, and breaking them, even hell, trying to destroy magic weapons or turning them over to the police might be a thing that would happen in this world. Zevron says sorcerers and sorceresses in Witcher 3 were rounded up and burned at the stake or brutally tortured to death. You could tell players that you can be a magic user, but just know the public will hate and fear you. Prue says, or a wizard or other magic user faking being a cleric to get either precise magic or to practice magic. Better be careful them, and they may turn you in if you openly display magic, and that very well could be a thing. Even the more fighter classes, rangers, fighters, barbarians, the warrior classes, people, those in power will probably want to recruit you. And if you're just like, no, I really don't want to be part of that power structure. Again, it's like, if you're not my friend, you're my enemy, right? It's oh, well, you must be a sellsword. Who are you selling your sword to? And of course, the PCs are like, well, I'm not selling my sword to anybody. I just want to go about my own life. And in this dark time, there's always going to be the people like, hey, if you're not supporting me, then you must be part of the evil. You must be part of the rebellion. You must be, or whatever the buzzword is of the time, that you're wrong. Zevran says wizards wearing light armor to pose as mercenaries, or trained to use heavy armor to pose as knights and guards. Mage armor may be a thing where mage armor may look like real armor to pose, so they can hide in troops and things, marching through the muck in the darkness. And that's the other part of the theme of this world, where everything's like dark, black, brown, gray. The enlightenment is gone, and so everything just seems to be, for me, I always get the impression that it's always stormy. There's always dark clouds. The sun never seems to poke its head behind the clouds. And then when the sun sets, there's always like ravens and rats and bats. It just seems to be, there just seems to be this idea that it's always dirty and grimy. And all of us have seen those medieval shows, television shows, where, like Vikings, I'm just bringing up Vikings, for example, where even in the halls of those who have power and money, it just always seems to be cold and unfeeling, even surrounded by gold and finery. But most people seem to wear like nothing much more than sandals and burlap sacks for clothing. Everyone says, let's be honest, the Gandalf looking man in old gray robes and wielding the walking staff is kind of the giveaway. Yeah. Not a good look if you're like, I'm not a wizard, and everyone's like, why the hat with the stars and moon on it? My head's cold and I found it. It's not a thing, right? It's just the fact that Yeah, Prue says, "Who, me, a wizard? Of course not." Whistles innocently, like, "Not me," twiddling their thumbs, like, "Look past me, keep going, keep going." There could be those in power may have some kind of techniques to hunt out magic and wizards, maybe dogs, displacer beasts, or or what was mentioned before, during a prehistoric time, like blink hyenas or something. There could be like there could be some kind of creature or lost items or something that allow them to triangulate when magic is being used and hunt those individuals down. So maybe there's like winter wolves or death dogs or whatever. It doesn't matter. Pick up something that these inquisitors roam around with that can smell it when it's been cast. So if a wizard casts I don't know, a light spell, an alarm spell, or a floating disc spell, that it has a residual effect, and these investigators can sniff it out, and then they can question the population, like, who was here, where have they gone, and track them by their spell castings. So that could be a limiting factor where it's not limiting how much the players can use their magic, but limiting the fact that if they use their magic, there's a greater chance of them being pinpointed, being found. Yeah, as everyone says, hell, I always thought you should have a bayonet on your staff as a fallback. I thought that might just be a spear. Yeah, they're the idea of like wizards might need to like defend themselves physically. We, of course, in role-playing games, we don't think of wizards as being very combat effective. I mean, yeah, they have a staff, they have like a dagger. I think now they're able to use hand crossbows and darts and stuff like that. But that might be very important, especially if they want to, let's say a scout finds them and they know if they use a spell like a charm spell or like, blast them into nothingness, that it will draw the enemy. So maybe these wizards now have to use like guerrilla tactics, because it might be better to stab them with a dagger. Then it would be more effective for their survival to stab them with a dagger than it would be to blast them with a ray of acid or cold or something. Rickard says, someone attacking you in a back alley and all you got is a spell. Well, that would set off an alarm for all mage hunters in the district. Yeah, and that's the thing, right? I'm sorry, I apologize, Rickard. He says, to be fair, wizards never learning melee and range combat as a secondary fallback was always weird to me, and even more so if you want to not stand out as a magic user. And now, mind you, technically, as wizards in games gain levels, they actually are able to fight better than the average citizen. Not very much so, but better, if that makes sense. So, because if your average person has, if your average person has maybe 3 to 5 hit points, a wizard could kill them in hand-to-hand combat. They're not going to be effective against a group of like a mob of people, but sure, they could defend themselves. They start gaining levels. They get the 5th, 6th level. They start gaining their proficiency bonuses go up. So that is kind of like their skills in getting better. But at the same time, they can still be attacked and pinned down and arrested and maybe charged with unrestricted wizardry. That kind of thing. He's from the wizarding school, burn it down, whatever. That would be very, very interesting. But so we have ourselves like decadent leadership, we have the destruction of knowledge, we have disease and plague running rampant, famine as well, a huge underclass. Disease and plague is one of these tricky things to use in game, because on one hand, if the players are never vulnerable to disease, it just becomes a backdrop. It's never really a threat. Zephyron08 says the average peasant tops off at level 2, level 3 at the most, right? Exactly. So if you could become a 5th level wizard, you can, I mean, you could fight yourself out of being maybe surrounded by a couple of thugs, but you better make a run for it when the pitchforks and the torches come out, when they start hunting down hunting down you evil bastards that are casting magic. So but with plague and disease, the those that are divine, the clerics only operating for the ruling class, that if the PCs hang around, or if they associate themselves with those that are sick, it's a possibility that the PCs may gain some kind of symptoms and might need to make a run for it, or hide themselves, or just decide for themselves whether they even want to stick around any longer, right? So you could, or someone brought this up before, and I don't know if this fits in with what we're creating today, but it could be an idea that disease allows PCs to have some arcane touch, but at the same time, it also means that they're going to be sick and die, right? So that could be a thing. Oh no. Oh, Prue, sorry. Prue, have a good one. Sorry, you got to go. See you. Tesla Ranger says, not the European Dark Ages, but Sinbad the Sailor was late 8th century. That's the right time period, at least. Yeah, and we're blending. Well, not blending. I'm butchering time periods, right? I'm just talking. I'm butchering the time periods of like the Dark Age of, and then fill in your culture. So, right, like Sinbad the Sailor could have been around, or just on the outer cusp of the Dark Age at that time. And we don't really, I know I don't know very much of the Dark Age of other cultures, but I'm sure that every culture has gone through one. Whether it's just been decimated by outside influences, or upended from internal influences as well. There's a lot of evidence for in China of the different regimes in China and Japan, and they've gone through their dark ages and rose up and down as different people take control and that kind of thing. So everyone says, what is the diplomacy at this point, if there is any? Do leaders try to just conquer and destroy? Do they seek alliances and to share supplies and soldiers? And that could be a thing, right? Is the power structure insular, meaning like everyone is an outsider and they're all xenophobic and they don't trust anyone else? Or are they trying to, if someone else has resources, are they just straight up dominating the other community without dealing with them in diplomatic ways? It could be that each small community wants to find out if the other community is harboring evil, and so there's suspicion that they don't want an infection of ideas, right? They don't want, there's everyone else thinks someone else is going to infect their people with changing the way things are, whether it's leaving the community or thinking that they have rights that you're trying to take away from them. If you're in a point of power, you're in a leadership position. So that could also be a thing where everyone's just suspicious of each other. And so maybe there's these like small little cadres of people that go out to try to make deals with other places, like, hey, they have grain and we have clean water, and we need grain and they need clean water. But while it would make sense for us to just share openly so we can all live, it's just like, we're going to have to take a couple of weeks and get together and feel each other out, and maybe even send in spies or something like that. Let's see. Rickard says, that said, you'd probably have more like 40 to 100 clerics of higher levels in such cities. Because it goes on to say, here's the thing about plague. Say you have 4 to 6 clerics in a city that can cure it. How many could they realistically cure? There are sources that place some old world cities close to 1 million people. And I mentioned that before, right? As player characters, it's easy to heal. Hey, I've got 5 allies. I'm going to use healing word. I'm going to cure disease. I'm going to cure poison or something. But like you said, 4 to 6 clerics can't heal 10,000 people, especially if especially if the cleric heals someone, walks away, and that person goes back to their families who are still sick, and then they get that disease again, right? If it spreads that way, or if you claim in your world it spreads by breathing or blood or close proximity or something like that, physical contact or whatever, then they're just going to get sick again, or it's just going to continue to spread, especially if you have people from outside the cities coming in who are bringing in disease, or people in the city transporting their disease outside the city. Or who's to say that healing doesn't make you a carrier, right? You heal someone of disease, but they're still a carrier for disease is also a possibility as well. So yeah, you'd have to have like 4,100 clerics to keep it at bay. And I'm thinking that there wouldn't be enough clerics to keep it at bay, right? That would be the point of keeping it as a dark age. Like, there aren't enough people can be religious without being clerics and pray that they get healing, and they may or may not get it. So there might only be 4 to 6 literally divinely touched clerics in a city that's got 40 to 100 clerics in it. If you understand what follow me along, right? They're all praying that we hold off the plague, but only a few are actually their divine calling is being answered. Zevron says the Lord region told us these dwarves claimed all the mines. That's why we live in mud houses. We must hunt them down, hoarding those supplies for themselves. Yeah, exactly. I mean, and the dwarves might have best been like, if you just asked, we would have shared, and we don't want to live in mud houses anyway, right? But that can be a thing where there's, the open slaughter of somebody else because they've got more resources than you, or just rationalizing the fact that they have resources and they're keeping them from you, or they have resources and they're evil. Evil people shouldn't have resources. Only the good people should have resources. Rickard says, yeah, even with 100 clerics, high enough levels to deal with it, you wouldn't be able to keep a virulent plague in control if it's 1 million people. Exactly. Because you would end up spiraling around the same drain. Every time you heal a portion of the population, even with 100 clerics, the other portion of the population is the engine that's fueling the plague in the first place, as opposed to, I hate to say this, but the easy button of, well, I just cure disease. Now, of course, depending on the world, we're talking about a dark age. So does cure disease destroy the disease and you're done? Or does cure disease make you immune to the disease, but the disease still exists? And so in a dark age, I would say the disease still exists. It still runs rampant. And even in a city where everyone is under a protectorate of these clerics, who's to say that the clerics aren't also rather evil, right? Who's to say that they aren't also complete bastards, or the city leaders are bastards and the clerics are just trying to do their job just to try to heal people, but they have no political influence. All the huddled masses on the outside of the city states are like, listen, I want to be in the city. I want to be under that protectorate too. I really don't care how evil they are. Sure, they might whip me in the middle of the street and force me into slave labor, but at least I'm alive, right? I don't have to see my loved ones, my children, and family die from this disease. Hey, I'll volunteer to work in the mines if you heal my family and take care of them. And how easy would that be, right? To have a leader just fold their arms and just like, okay, all right, we'll let you in the city. 50 years, we're going to need combined 50 years hard labor. Oh, and by the way, when your kids get old enough, we heal them. We're going to need them to work in the mines as well. We're going to need you to work for your survival. And some people would go for it if for no other reason to have the hope that one day they may be able to get out of it, or to live through this dark time, especially if they feel that the gods are punishing them, using plague and disease to punish them, and then to huddle themselves in these protectorates before going out into the world where they feel that maybe, disease has been wiped out or something. Zevron says leaders could also be warlocks to gain power. A fiend pack might agree to a contract of totalitarianism, being a warlord. Those he kills or subjugates get their soul sent to the devil or demon lord. Hell yeah. Hell yeah. And demons and fiends and devils, or most of them, are able to change their shape. Having a smiling face and glowing white robes and looking pristine and never being, never looking downtrodden would be the epitome of evil. Dead Man the Storyteller says one class level character for every 100 people. So 1 million people would mean 10,000 class level characters, with clerics being about 2 to 4% of those characters. Wow. That's yeah, that's a lot. And honestly, that doesn't even sound right. Like, I mean, I get, not the statistics. I'm saying the idea that there would be 10,000 class levels needed of just clerics, being 2 to 4% of them, just to keep the people alive. Yeah, wow, that just sounds like quite outrageous. Not saying it wouldn't happen. I'm saying, like, ooh, man, would there be that many? I mean, could you? It reminds me of Eberron, right? Would there be that much magic in a city that big, and that available? Possible, sure. There may be very few cities that are populated that way, and the ones that are the ones that hold the power, because they're the safety net of society before it all collapses. And even them as a safety net, you're just looking at them like, I don't want. Oh man, they're brutal and evil and decadent. I don't even know if I want to be part of them. The whole time they're preaching to everybody else that everyone else is wrong, right? Rickard says, as for the plague angle, we also assume that it's natural. If there's a source that tries to spread it actively, we add even more to the trouble. Yeah, especially if you're from the age previous, you might be one of these, you meaning like group wise or whatever, like might be one of these people that's trying to spread the disease. Who's to say druids aren't like, disease is supposed to wipe us out? That's nature. You're not supposed to stop it. It's a cleansing act, right? Rickard goes on to answer Deadman. Out of those 400 clerics, how many would be high enough to heal more than one person a day? And even if they could heal more than one person a day, like I said, are they healing the symptoms or are they healing the source? If they're only healing the symptoms, they'll never overcome it, right? If they're healing just healing the symptoms, if they're healing the source, sure, they might be able to stop it a little bit, but I mean, you'll never fully prevent the influx and outflow of transients. People will always sneak over walls. People will always bribe their way into and out of cities. People will always want to. Kids will always want to sneak out of the town. There will always be black markets where they're trying to go over the walls and deal with things. You're always going to have criminals fleeing. You're always going to have refugees trying to come in. And so that back and forth, that would be really difficult unless you have more than, in 1 million people, 400 clerics would not be able to keep control. Zevron says, how many are not just fighters who took magic initiate and have a high charisma? Which is true too. But see, now we're trying to, we're not this wouldn't be a dark age, right? We're rationalizing how many clerics and healing classes would we need to keep a plague at bay for 1 million people. Mind you, what other things are they doing besides that, right? 400 clerics are not going to be all under one. They're not going to be of a single mind. Yes, you have people loyal to a king or to a purpose, or to an oath, or to their friends or family, but you're always going to, once people have power, they're going to be individuals. They're going to go, wait a minute, why am I doing this? I'm a cleric. I'm faithful. I'm going to take my own family and leave. So you're going to have that too, a breakdown. While you may have some that are loyal, there will be you're not going to get 100% of everyone engaged in the same act all the time to try to hold it off. Daniel Daniel Ciarfus. I'm butchering your name, so I apologize. Daniel says maybe due to Dark Age loss of knowledge, clerics can cure some people, but they remain carriers, thus an unending loop of misery. Right. That's what I was saying. That like if this is a Dark Age, the reason may be that they're just curing the symptoms. They're temporarily making a cure, but the people they're not curing are still holding it, or the people they are curing are just spreading the disease to the people who aren't protected, inoculated, or whatever. Yeah, Zebron says, oh, by the way, I hope y'all are okay. Here in the Midwest, it's minus 30 to minus 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Yeah, it is. It's going to be brutal here. I think Central Ohio, we're going to go like minus 20s to 30s, I think, today. So, yeah, it's gonna be terrible. I work outside, so that makes it even worse. Hey, kitty. Rickard says, eventually they might solve the problem, but in the meantime, how long does it take and how many would it claim? And who I would agree, not only agree to that, I'm going to add to that, Rickard, that who makes the decision to sacrifice whom to solve the problem, right? You at some point, I bet they'll find out that you're going to have to keep certain people away, and to keep them away, someone's going to have to say, okay, we're going to have to assemble an army. We're going to have to assemble armed people and make like leprosy camps in essence, right? Plague camps. You live in this valley, you can't leave the valley. Or the minute you're diseased, you go into the valley and that's it. Or hey, we healed you, but now you're going to have to serve as a guard and kill anyone that leaves this diseased area, right? Because you now maybe you become you're still a carrier, but you're healed of the symptoms of it. Thanks, Kitty. Rickard also says, if the soldiers get infected, the ruler might be worried about a rival looking to capitalize on it. The people of the slow become low prior, and that would just cause things to escalate. Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. So you're saying that like a ruler might want to capitalize on those who are who live in the slums. Yes. And that's a thing, right? Like, you know, we've known armies that have used infected blankets to infect their enemies. We've known using catapults to throw dead bodies because they were infected over city walls. We've seen that before. We know the murdering and elimination of the slums, the burning of bodies, both living and dead, to get rid of disease. That would be a thing. And if you're a paladin in this world, you're trying to save lives, but do you support a regime that's like, hey, we're going to have to burn 10,000 people today to keep the plague at bay? I mean, do you go, yeah, that's what we need to do? Or are you like, no, they're living and they deserve to be cared for? And everyone's like, yeah, you're immune to disease, but we're not. So see ya. Zevron says, yeah, an interesting concept. While these people are in a dark age, maybe monstrous races are in a renaissance. Ooh. They're making industry, experiments, advancing, but they're far, far off from each other. I like that. I like that a lot. Maybe there are advances and the majority isn't paying attention to it, like they've rebelled against it, but these small enclaves are like, we're orcs, but we're not that barbaric. You guys burning dead bodies in the streets and stuff like that. We're much more advanced than that. But since you won't listen, oh well, that's your fault. You know, Zevron goes on to say an encroaching force is growing and they can demolish the state. And of course, we as the very intelligent role-playing community, we see the holes in what a dark age is, right? We know that it can't last forever, which is the whole point of why the dark age didn't last forever, right? But if you're living through it, you don't see the end of it. Or maybe if you're living through it, you're on the cusp of it ending, and the PCs might be the force that pushes it over. But if you live in a 100, 200, 300 year period, you would never see the end of it. You're just born, and you live and die in a region, in a time period that just never never goes on, right? Like we're living in a social media explosion, but we don't know what we don't know what the tail end is 100, 200, 300, 500 years from now. We're living through it right now. And so in hindsight, sure, but as it is, no. So all right, guys, we've hit the hour mark. It is going to be like negative like 30 to 50 degree wind chill factors, so I got to get ready for work. Thank you guys for joining me on the Dark Ages. We're going to talk about this was mentioned in the in the comments of another video, and I think this would be kind of cool to kind of blend these together. The piracy age, Victorian age, Old West age, and the age of the samurai all existed around the same time. Civil War even. Yet they seem to be definitive eras. So it would be kind of cool to talk about blending them together and talking about those areas. yeah. That man says, yeah, gotta hate that global warming. Yeah. Zephyron says, DBJ, love you, but these 5 a.m. streams are killing me. Look, I get it. I'm really sorry. Yeah, I'm really sorry. Yeah, record says, wait, you have minus 30 degrees Fahrenheit? Yeah. Zephyron says, yep, it's minus 40 here. Yeah. I think the actual temperature might be like negative 5 to 10, and wind chill just makes it so brutal. So yeah, gotta go, guys. So guys, everybody out there, thank you for joining me. Have a great day. I will see thee tomorrow.